So I was driving our C10 yesterday and I realized that we had a problem pretty quickly into my drive. As I was driving, I happened to look down at the voltage gauge and I noticed that we were actually losing voltage as we were driving down the road. Now usually what that means is that the alternator is starting to fail or has failed already. So I went ahead, charged up the battery quick when I got back, diagnosed it, and did find our alternator to be bad. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to replace an alternator on your 67 to 72 Chevy C10. So this is the ProForm 160 amp one wire alternator for the 1960 to 1987 Chevy C10. And if you're like us with a bad alternator, then this is going to be the perfect replacement for you. Or if you have a C10 and you upgraded all of the audio bits inside of it and you have a lot more power being pulled, then this is another good option for you as well. Now this alternator is going to come in this beautiful chrome finish with the machine pulley, but if you're not a fan of that chrome look, ProForm does sell a ton of different alternators on our website, so head over and check it out. We have some that are wrinkled black or some that just look more OEM, and then of course the beautiful chrome finish, which we'll be throwing on our truck today. Like I said in the beginning, this is a one-wire alternator, and for the people who don't know what that means, the one-wire alternator uses an internal voltage regulator that self-regulates the alternator's output. So there's no need for a traditional style external voltage regulator found on many earlier generators and alternator charging systems. As far as installing one of these alternators, it's honestly super easy, so let's go rip our old one out and throw this new one in. Before we take the old alternator off, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the positive terminal on the battery, because anytime you're working with anything electrical, it's a good idea to do so you don't end up shorting out the system or shorting out yourself. Now we're going to want to take some tension off of the actual serpentine belt here, so we're going to go over to the adjustment side, loosen this bolt up. We'll actually take it all the way out because that's one of the ways the alternator mounts, and then we'll work on our bottom bolt. As you can see, with that bolt loose or out, you can move the alternator, which then will loosen up the serpentine belt to be able to pull off. Now we're going to remove the second bolt here. This is our second mounting bolt from the alternator, so once this is removed, we'll be able to remove the alternator from the engine. It's now time to remove the alternator, but before doing so, there usually is a plug right here on the back side of the alternator, so go ahead and disconnect that as well. And then remove your alternator. Before installing the new alternator, we will have to remove this bracket from the old one. And then we will install this on our new alternator, and then put the new alternator on the engine. So real quick, before I throw the new alternator in, I do want to point something out. Now I just told you you're going to take the bracket from the old alternator and put it on the new alternator. Well, I'll be completely honest, this is my first time installing a ProForm alternator. Not my first time installing an alternator, but this specific brand. So when I took that bracket off and moved it over to our new alternator, I quickly found out that we actually don't have threads on the back of it to install that bracket. Now, I did some research on our website. It turns out the ProForm actually sells a spacer instead of having that big adapter there, so you can just throw that on and then install your alternator as normal. Now what I did, since I'm on a little bit of a time crunch and we have a show to make it to on Sunday, I actually went ahead and cut that bracket off of the old one here, so now it's just a cylinder, so it works as a spacer. Threw some paint on it to make it what it ain't, and now we're gonna throw it in the truck and get this new alternator on. All right, so we're gonna get our alternator into place here. Line that up. Put your bolt through. Once you have your bolt through, just start threading it in, but we're not going to tighten it down all the way yet. With the alternator on, grab your serpentine belt, push the alternator in a little bit, and then you can pop that right on over the alternator pulley. And then once you have the belt on, slide the alternator towards the passenger side of the truck until the belt starts to get some tension on it. Once you have it in a spot, you don't want the belt too tight, you don't want it too loose. Go ahead and throw your bolt in. Okay, so now we're going to tighten this bolt up a little bit. Now what I usually like to do if I'm just by myself, I'll grab a pry bar, put it on the other side of the alternator to push it towards the passenger side of the truck. That way I get my serpentine belt tight, and then we'll tighten the bolt down from there. Now we're going to tighten up the bottom bolt here to the alternator. The last thing that we need to do is hook up power to the alternator, and they recommend running a 12 gauge wire from this post to the positive side of our battery. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. And then we're going to hook the other end up to the positive side of our battery. Well, as you guys can see, we got the alternator all wrapped up. This install is super easy. You could probably knock it out in about 30-45 minutes, even if you have no experience doing this. And like I said, go ahead and order that spacer a while when you're ordering the alternator, and then you don't have to cut up the factory one to make it work. I will say though, with it painted black, you can't even really see it's in there, and since it's got the chrome finish on the alternator, it really takes your eyes away from almost everything else too. So if you guys do want to purchase this alternator, I'll have the link down below in our description, and I'll also have that spacer down below in the description as well. It's time to drop a gear and disappear. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.